So this particular method is going to explain how you can create a quiz method within your application. Now I guess there are many ways of doing that in an application, and by no means is this way the only way, or should I say the most efficient way. It is a very basic way of implementing a quiz, but you may find it quite a useful pointer in terms of how you may decide to build a quiz in any controlled assessment. So what I have created here, I've initialized all my variables. I have a char or car, correct answer, and the answer chosen. That will store the correct answer, which I will specify at the outset for each question, and then the answer chosen is what the user has entered in. And I've also set a quiz score variable equal to 0, so then once the user has identified themselves at the start of the quiz and they start the quiz, then that quiz score is set to 0. The usual then the app title set at the geography quiz. The app title then loads a banner at the top so the user knows where they are or what program they're in, and then the geography quiz or the breadcrumbs then that tells the user whereabouts in the program they are. Then I have a string user, and this simply then will allow me the user to enter in their username. I have a boolean which set invalid to true, which basically ensures that the person entering the username enters a correct or valid username. I have two other variables, a previous best score and a fail counter. So the fail counter allows me to adapt the error message that the user sees if they fail to enter the correct username more than once, or a second time essentially. So previous best score I've set to 0. So what happens here is once the user has logged in with their correct username, it will find that user's previous best score in the two-dimensional array. So it will go to this file here, it will go to the last column and find for this particular user what their previous best score is. And the reason that's important is because if they get a score in this quiz which is higher than this, then you want to check if it's higher, and if it is higher, then to overwrite their existing previous best score with their new best score. Okay, so again we're into another do while, which, as you should know by now, is our error handling mechanism. It shoot first, ask questions later. So it executes the code and then asks if the code is what is expected to be, or if what has been entered into the program is what is expected, and if it's not what is expected, then it will ask the user to do it again and enter the values again. So here within this do while, I've got this little if else. So this is just another example of error handling mechanism. This is the first time I've used it within this program, because you don't have to use it everywhere to show how you handle error, but it does show the examiner that you understand how error handling mechanisms work within a program. And all it does is as I say, this fail counter variable keeps a track of how many times you have entered the username wrong, and if it's currently set to 0, so the first time into this it'll output this. It will say please enter username of the person taking the quiz. If however this is their second or third time, or more than their first time into the program, this fail counter will be incremented here, you see, within the do part of the do while. So if it's more than their first time, the statement will be true, so fail counter will be greater than 0, in which case it says username does not exist, please re-enter username. So then I either, whether it's the first if or the if or the else console.writeLine is outputted, it will then ask the user to enter username either way, and then it will read it in and convert it to lowercase, and that's important because everything is stored in lowercase, and it is case sensitive matching. Whenever you're looking for a match, it is case sensitive. So then I've got the username, and all I'm doing here is iterating through the two-dimensional array as determined by the number of rows, which this method of the string class allows me, or of the two-dimensional string class allows me to get the number of rows in that two-dimensional array. So it iterates through each row in the two-dimensional array, and then it checks each row in that first column. And remember, in the first column, that's where the usernames are stored. That's column 0. So in that first column, for each row, it checks if the username entered matches any of those. So it iterates through each row, and once it finds a match, it then sets invalid to false. In other words, it's no longer an invalid username, and that allows me to escape the loop. But before it escapes the loop, it finds the previous best score for that particular user. So it goes to that same row, and remember, it finds the match. Once it's found the match, we're still on that current value of I. It finds the row of that student and then plucks out the previous best score. So it plucks out the previous best score, and then it assigns this variable. Increments fail counter, even though we're now going to exit the loop, but it increments it anyway, and now we're at this point in the program. And then it says welcome, or console.writeLine, welcome user. Remember, the user is something that we've read in here, so that I guess personalizes the program a little. It makes it more user friendly, it makes it familiar to the user, and that's something again you would talk about in your write-up about how your application is user friendly. So it concatenates the username and the previous best score into this welcome message. Then it says press any key to start the quiz, and that's the console.read key that sort of holds it paused, if you like. And then I put this thread.sleep in. Now I don't necessarily know if you really need that. You'd really want your quiz to start straight away, but it gives the user, I guess, some time just to prepare for the quiz to load up. And remember, if you want to use thread.sleep, you have to import, you have to put this little statement in using system.threading. So back to, I think it was 249, or yeah, that's it there. So then we call the app title, we tell the user now we're on question 1 of the quiz, and you are just outputting both the question and then the options that the user has to enter. Now I'm just using multiple choice in the quiz. In this particular quiz, it's up to you how you implement, if indeed you're asked to implement a quiz in your application. But the options are Paris, Marseille, Nantes and Dieppe. What is the capital of France? And you'll see I've used escape characters then, you know, just to separate the values. Console.writeLine, this will take a new line anyway, but then this takes a new line within the same console.writeLine, and that's escape character in. Then again, I'm going to be reading data in, so I need to use my try catches. And all I've said is the answer, and this is the same for each question. So this structure, if you like, is repeated for each question. So I'm only going to show you one quiz question because it's exactly the same for the other quiz questions. So I'm going to read in the character that they enter, and I'm going to convert it to lowercase, so I'm not checking every, both uppercase and lowercase permutations. So I'm reading in the value, the letter that they've entered, converting it to lower, setting it to the answer chosen, and then the correct answer for this particular question is obviously A, Paris. What is the capital of France? And then what I've said is, I've said the quiz score is plus equal to check question, answer chosen, correct answer. So in other words, I farmed out, I've delegated the responsibility of checking whether or not that particular question or the answer that was given is correct for that particular question. I've farmed that out to a method. Now you don't have to do that. Does it make it any more efficient? Possibly not, but I've just done that, I guess, just for something different. Now this quiz score, don't forget, is an int variable, and I've set it equal to 0. So in other words, this must return an integer. This method must return an integer, because what this plus equals essentially means is it means quiz score equals the current quiz score plus whatever result this method returns after determining whether or not the person got it right based on the answer for that question and the answer that they chose. And that's what that method does. So if we just find the check question method, now I'm not sure if it's up or down, it's down. So this returns an int. It returns an int number to the part of the program that called it, but it needs the answer chosen and the correct answer. So that's probably why you see here the answer chosen is what the user entered, and the correct answer I've set to A. So it needs those two variables. So I've set user score to 0. If the correct answer equals the answer chosen, then increment the user score plus 1, and then tell them, well done, correct answer. Otherwise, if it's not true, if the correct answer doesn't equal the answer chosen, say hard luck, wrong answer, the correct answer was, and then tell them which letter was the correct answer. Either way, you return the user score, and the user score, it will only be incremented if this is true, if the correct answer equals the answer chosen. So that will return a 1 or a 0, and it will add it on to the quiz score for this particular user. And this is their quiz score as they move through the quiz. So let's say they got that right, that is equal to 1. It moves on to question 2, and it essentially repeats that process again. Again, delegating the task of checking whether that question is right or wrong, and then incrementing the counter by 1. It forms it out to that check question method. So it repeats that for the next few questions. Then we have a catch, again, which ensures that if there are any issues with the input, those issues are caught and outputted and handled appropriately, and then the quiz reloaded. And then we've said, once that's all over, it's the end of the quiz. Now, that's not the end of the method, because what we now need to do is we need to check if that user score is better than their existing user score. And if it is, then we need to overwrite it. So we do that again by iterating through each row in the two-dimensional array, and we find that particular student. So if the username is equal to the username as determined by the data in column 0 for a particular student, as you iterate through each row in the two-dimensional array. So if that matches, if the username matches for this particular row for the username, then it checks the quiz score, and if the quiz score that they achieved in their current quiz is greater than the number stored in column 9, and remember we have to convert it to an int because everything in this two-dimensional array is stored as a string. So for this current row that you found the match of the username for, retrieve the quiz score, convert it to a number, then check if the current quiz score is greater than this number. If that's true, if their current quiz score is better than what's stored, then we need to update it. In other words, we need to update the two-dimensional array, the working memory two-dimensional array, to whatever their quiz score is. And again, because it's a two-dimensional string array, we need to convert the quiz score, so that's the score that they've got in the current quiz, to a string, and then we store it in column 9 for that particular row that we found a match for that user. Then, because we've made changes to that file, we need to write it to file. We need to take it from working memory and write it to back in storage. Tell the user what we've done. Tell them that they've got a new high score. Press any key to continue, and then the console.read key, and then the main menu. If we find that the user that should be there actually. So if the quiz score is not greater than their score stored on record, then we need to just needed, that bracket was in the wrong place. So if I just move that in, it's always good to get your alignment right. It just keeps everything right. So that else is for that if. So let's just move all that code in. Yeah, so it looked as if that else was matching that if. So if that is not true, if the quiz score is not better than there, and it has to be better. If it's the same, there's no point in overriding it, because what's the point in swapping the same number for the same number, or a number for the same number? So if that's not true, then you're outputting their quiz score, but saying, listen, you failed to beat your previous best, press any key to return to the main menu. Either way, you return and load up the main menu. And that is it